Yeah, so there are some characters in story games that have facial expressions and visemes and some animations, but it's not the most common thing in the world. Like we're talking AAA $1 million budget games have them,
Mm,
like that have taken them 5 years to make. Versus in VRChat, we see those every avatar.
mm,
If we could make like an average of like one person, like one avatar per game, right? Out of
yeah.
all the avatars in all the games, there is more avatars with these fancy features in VRChat than in PC games.
Hello, welcome to Metaverse Degen. I'm Lion. Unfortunately, Raptor's a bit under the weather today, so it's just going to be me and our guest.
Hello, my name is Rechshon. I make worlds, props, and avatars.
Oh,
At the moment, I'm currently redoing my portfolio, so I don't have anything to show as of yet, and finishing a few projects.
wow, that seems like quite the thing to get into. What got you started with all that, with making worlds, props, and avatars and all that stuff?
Well, when I first played VR, like 6 to 8 years ago, a very long time ago, when like the first HTC came out, I was playing games, loved battle royales, started playing those, and I started to see the sad state of how rudimentary, or in better terms, how the graphics and how gameplay was very basic
Hmm.
and wasn't at all what we think of what PC games are today. So I was like, I bet I can make a better game. I bet I can do this. And started my journey of going through making a game, 2 years later, working in Blender, Unity, and doing some basics on Unreal, and finding what I wanted to make. So that is what got me into it. I just thought one day that I could do it.
Wow. How how long did it take you to get to where you are now with all the knowledge you've accrued since you started?
Uh, in total, about 3 years, but in Blender alone, took me like less than 6 months. In Unity, took like if I were to just like speedrun of how to learn Unity again, it would mostly be 3 months to learn just Unity without learning all the programming. Programming, you need a year.
Oh wow. So you do the programming in yourself? And what do you mean by programming?
Yes, I mean programming, writing C# code in Unity
Oh
or
wow.
in any other game engine. Programming is more complicated, which is why I say it takes a year to do, because you need to learn the basics, your vocabulary, and if you need help, you have to know how to speak the vocabulary to another person of what you need help with. Because
Hmm.
speaking in normal terms rather than programming terms is a little different, right? It's like when you ask your math teacher, how do I finish this algebra problem, but you don't know what the algebra problem is called.
Hmm. Fair enough. So what were some places to get that got you started in writing C sharp and for your what you do?
I went to places like Udemy, basically online classrooms that
Hmm.
allow me to do over the shoulder. They program a game and I follow along, and then afterwards I like play around with the settings, play around with what code and what syntax and what order works and what doesn't. Right? Experimentation, trial and error
Hmm.
after the classes and after the fact. It's really helpful. But if someone is going to do coding, I would recommend that I didn't know at the beginning. Go buy a C# book. Go buy one of those program books that are well written. They'll just make it a lot easier.
Hmm. Okay. So with C sharp and with the conjunction of the Unity and Blender, what kinds of things can you do with it in terms of what you do?
Well, I can write game logic. I can write syntax and debug my game if I have a problem. So if I get an asset on the Unity store and I'd like to not take 2 years to program that asset, if I want to integrate it with my current part of my game, I would have to know how to debug it to make sure it works with the current version of Unity and to make sure that it works with my game. It's kind of like building a mod pack without coding. Not all video games desire coding or programming.
Hmm. Okay. So what what kinds of things? Ooh, you still there?
What the hell just happened?
I could hear you perfectly. Surprisingly, you just went AFK. Did your headset go dark? Whoa. Technical difficulties.
That's
So,
fine.
what have been some of the harder things for you to learn in your process, as well as what have been some of your favorite things to learn in the process?
I have to say for me, the hardest thing for me to learn in the process of getting to where I am today is the ability to use architecture and level design together to design a world. Interiors have been the difficulty and the bane of my existence as an
Mm.
artist. As a programmer, it has been network programming, network code.
Hmm.
So for each side of programming art, those two things have been the bane of my existence. But I learned them, but they were a pain.
Hmm. And do you have any favorite things you've learned as well? And,
Yes, I have loved learning all about photo scanning. So the
hmm.
process of taking photos or videos of an object in 360, putting them into a computer, let the computer do the math, and create a model for you. That has been very fun for me to learn. And on the programming side, learning how physics engines work and programming objects to work with the physics engine has been very fun,
Hmm.
especially ragdolls.
Oh, so you mentioned like 3D scans with a 360 picture. How does that work, and what is that specifically?
So photo scanning, video scanning, or laser scanning is the process of taking either photos, videos, or using laser machines to create a bunch of images, and those images are then used by scripts and some very primitive AI in some softwares to then output a point cloud. And then
Hmm.
after the point cloud, it goes through a script called a meshing algorithm that then makes.
Oh, oh, more technical difficulties. Please be patient. Oh, it does seem you're having quite a bit
All
of
right.
trouble there. Is everything all good?
Yes, my battery died.
Ah, so I'll ask the question again and we can re-answer it. How does the whole photo scanning,
Okay.
uh, in turning things into 3D models that way work? And what is it?
So, photo scanning is the process of either taking photo scanning, or video scanning is the process of taking photos, a video, or lasers on an object in a 360 around the object.
Hmm.
Lighting is very important, and once you have all of your images, you then take the images, plug it into a software, which could be primitive AI to process it or scripts, to then process that with the computer to make a point cloud. And then you take that point cloud, you run it through another set of scripts in the same software, as these all scanning softwares have it. And then after that, it outputs a mesh with a bunch of triangles. Now, by any means, if you make games, this is not a clean topology, as we say in the industry. It's a bunch of triangles. They're all messed up from a point cloud. But it still works. It's textured, and it still works. Can be put right into a game after some small decimation.
Hmm.
But that's generally the concept of how it works.
Okay. So it's like some of those 3D scanned worlds that you'll see in Vrchat now and again. Like you'll see some like out of Japan, like there's one very recently of a city in Japan, a few streets of it. Is it like that?
Yes. So those are raw scans. They have not been processed, nor have they been optimized.
Ah. So how would one process and optimize them for them to come out more perfectly and less, I guess, rough?
So first, I'm going to give an example of what photo scanned objects you have seen in games,
Hmm.
and then I'm going to explain the normal process goes about.
Okay.
First off, I give an example that Call of Duty, right? If you've ever played like the old Call of Duty games, Modern Warfare 2, 3, the Black Ops games, those are all photo scanned asset environments. All those environments that look so real, those are photo scanned. They actually
Oh
had teams
wow.
go out and scan cliffs and other rocks to make those assets
Oh wow.
um, in the thing. So that's a good reference. So that's the finished product. The product you go through, you take the raw scan, And you go either to Blender, Maya, whichever software you want to use for optimizing it. Sometimes these softwares have optimization tools, but I preferably just use Blender after I do it, after I mesh it.
Hmm.
There's two ways to optimize. There is, if the mesh is terrible, which means it's missing data or has holes in it, then you use the tool software that's included in the software. But if it's perfectly fine, right, it's a mesh that has no holes and there's nothing wrong with it, you take it in the Blender or Substance Painter. You take the mesh, you take the textures, you decimate the mesh, right, with the Blender Decimate add-on, or with Blender, decimate it, make it less triangles. Then you take the textures and you either put them in Substance Painter, right, or you put them in Photoshop, either or, to optimize either how much pixels they have, or in Blender just to rebake it so it's a smaller texture. You also have to UV the model again because the UV is all messed up from the scan, as game assets don't use multiple UV tiles; they use one. So you have to re-optimize it, repack it on 3 different fronts. And after you're done, you get something like the quality landscape cliffs that you have, and that's the optimal process. So as a repeat, for short, step 1, fix the mesh, fix the UV. Step 2, fix the UV, and step 3, fix the textures, right? Either with Substance Painter or with Blender baking, right? Those are usually how it is done, and after that is done, that is how you do it. The second way to optimize, if the mesh is just, if you scan for a reference, you just remake the model from scratch using the scan as a reference. Those are the 2 ways of how you do that. Same process.
Okay. So if ideally the scan comes out perfectly, it just eliminates the modeling process of like a world or whatever. Correct?
It eliminates most of the modeling work, yes.
Okay. So, but there's still
Not all of it, because if it's a person, you have to remake the model anyways.
And may I ask why you would have to remake the person a model of a person? May I ask?
Because if you scan a person and you want to animate it, it has to have near perfect topology to deform. So that's why you see characters with squares instead of a bunch of triangles. They have to be quadded. And then when they go into the video game, they get triangulated, cut the square in half. But generally, the shapes of all of the point clouds have to be shaped like squares, not like triangles, so that they'll move properly when you weight paint and rig a character for animation.
Okay. So may I ask why that was one of your favorite points of things you've learned, and how did you even get into that?
So, the reason it's my favorite is because it was one of the most challenging and one of the most exciting things to learn because it was challenging. It wasn't as simple as look up a video and how do I do this? There was a lot of trial and error that I had to do all the time, and I had to make my own workflow and explore and trial and error, which is something I love doing when learning something new. There's no guides written for it. There's not enough information. I have to do it myself to upgrade it and trial and error. And repeat the second half of the question.
How did you get involved with learning the whole 3D scan and photos?
So I learned 3D scanning. I wanted to do it actually before I started making my game. Actually, before I did VR, I was actually doing it with photos. I was going into photos as a graphic. Before I worked with Blender and other stuff, I was going for a graphic designer, which means I did 2D graphics instead of 3D. And I was doing photos, and I took a photography class. And that was about around the time I started to have the idea I want to make a game. So the first thing I went into was how could I make this game as fast as possible without learning modeling, without doing that, because I knew it would be a very long time to make assets. So like, okay, we have photo scanning, which I already know photography, I already know 2D graphics, great, and the software does it for me, perfect. So, but then I learned it's a lot more complicated than I thought it was, and there was a long time learning. It took me about 6 months to get clean results. Like 3 months was like the rough. I finished college, and then I experimented after the fact 3 more months to get all my perfect scans and to learn how to do it. And that's why it was the most exciting, is because it wasn't as easy to look up. I had to do it in real life in
Hmm.
order to learn. Like it was more hands-on.
Okay. So you referenced your game. What game is that, may I ask?
My game, which is near the end of its being finished, is Velocity VR. I basically wanted to make a PUBG VR,
Hmm.
which turned out took 3 years to make and was a lot more complicated than I thought it was,
Hmm. So
as
what
usual.
what made you want to pick that up, creating Velocity VR?
Well, I wanted to make better VR games
Hmm.
because VR games, as I went through the whole VR game fiasco of the beginning to what it is now, there's a few elements of VR gaming that was done fantastic at the beginning,
Hmm.
and then other parts like optimization wasn't done great. But now we have great optimization, but we have very terrible immersive experiences
Hmm.
in today's world, in my opinion, because it's really hard to find those. Right.
Hmm.
So that's what got me into it. I want to make better games. I want to make better experiences for VR.
Okay. So you're indie developing Velocity VR. Can you tell us anything about it? Like, is there a story? Is it like a regular shooter? How does it? What is it?
So it is a battle royale. It is a first-person shooter subgenre of battle royale. So
Hmm.
you have a bunch of people get dropped in a map. You go around. You annihilate until the last person. Right now, there's no squads or duos. It's just single. Um, and currently, you have climbing. Anything is destructible, like anything but the terrain. So like you can throw a grenade, the trees blow up, they fall down,
Hmm.
and you can get killed by them by squashing you. You can destroy walls with grenade launchers or any other types of explosives to infiltrate a house instead of walking through the front door,
Hmm.
right? Because I'm a fan of Rainbow Siege 6. I love exploding the walls,
Hmm. Okay.
right? So many different facets. It's a competitive population one, which is another battle royale, but it is also a non-competitor as well, because it has destruction climbing, and population one doesn't have a whole lot of destruction, but games before Pop One did.
Hmm. Okay. So how? What kinds of things did you learn to make this happen, and was it an easy thing to create?
The things I learned to make this happen is I learned as a little bit of a background. I've never made games.
Hmm.
As I said before, I was a graphic designer, so I've never done anything 3D. So I learned from zero. Never did before. And I had to learn asset creation, programming, and all the stuff in between, Unity, Blender, and in 3 years to make stuff and then understand the concept of why is stuff written and why does it work this way? Is there a better way?
Hmm.
Right. To do that took a very long time. And some of the stuff I said before also ties into making Velocity, as that was the first project that I attempted.
Oh wow. So how far away is Velocity VR?
Well, I mean, if I had more time in doing what I'm doing now, if I were to start it tomorrow and just work 6 to 8 hours a day on it, it would be done within less than 3 months. But as I have said, I do not have tons of time because I'm working on moving out and getting a new job and redoing my portfolio and finishing some other projects.
Hmm.
Velocity has kind of slipped into the background, but if I had to put a time on it, probably within the next year.
Okay. So after you've learned world building assets as well as Velocity VR, what other projects do you foresee yourself doing?
My future projects that I look very much forward to is personal, probably creating a avatar procedurally, entirely by programming with no Blender editing,
Oh.
where it's kind of like creating a character creator, but for avatars, and they're made for VR avatars.
Hmm.
So that I can create in Blender a huge GeoNode system and create anything I want. Add a tail, edit the length, the width, the everything. And that means the models the UVs and the textures would all be procedural. Anything could be changed non-destructively, which would save me a lot of time and would save everyone else in VR a ton of time. And that creator would be able to make anything from furry avatars to human avatars to fairies, dragons, whatever you want, right?
Yeah.
As long as it's humanoid.
Okay. So, how would this system work?
So the system would, if anyone watching knows what blend shapes are, or if you don't, if you could create a character without modeling, without programming, and you can just move a bunch of sliders like in a normal character creation game, like you boot up your MMORPG, you have all those sliders, right? That would be in Blender. You just have a bunch of sliders that you can just slide. There's like thousands of them, but they're organized enough that it doesn't feel like thousands. And you go through each one of them, and you can edit everything, and therefore it should take a lot less time for people to pull out avatars than it takes now.
So, the average person would be moving sliders. How would one start with like a blob and then create an avatar with these sliders?
So what you would start with is a base mesh. So the character would look finished, right? Just like a normal character, you start with a base character, and then you edit that base character. So there's always the 0 point, and then you move the sliders to what you want, right? You move the chin, the cheeks, and the hair, what type of hair you want. And because of GeoNodes in Blender is a modular non-destructive system, you could take any hair that you have made with GeoNodes and just drop it into the system, and it would just propagate your head with new hairstyles, right? So you could do that, edit the properties of the hair, edit the shape of the hair, even whole new hairstyles. If you wanted jewelry, then that would be a separate part of the system. But just the general body would be made, not counting clothes or accessories.
Okay.
Right, so the general base mesh of the avatar.
Okay. So it'd be for those who want to edit an avatar if they've purchased, not necessarily someone wants to make one from scratch.
It's more of the people that want to make it from scratch, because it replaces the modeling and sculpting, but it's not a completely finished model in terms of it doesn't have clothes, it doesn't have jewelry, it doesn't have any of the other stuff. That you can kit bash onto it.
Okay.
But it's to build the hardest part, which is the character itself, the body, the head, the face.
Alrighty. Well, that sounds actually pretty awesome. What made you want to pick that up as a project?
So going through and learning character creation, to do character creation for Vrchat as well as with very few VTubers, I realized that VR avatars are vastly different than all the other video game avatars that we make normally.
Okay.
Right? I mean, you have visemes to move your mouth. You have animations for your eyes, your pupils, your cheeks, your face. You have animations for your belly, your butt, your chest, your ears, even your gestures, which has many layers of complexity, which we don't normally have in normal PC video games. And I realized there was no resources for this. There was no way to create VRChat characters other than from scratch. That's the only option if you wanted very specific facial expressions, gestures, and how you move your face, your neck, and everything else to your own face. That was the only way to do it.
Okay. So no other video game uses as you said, the visemes and a lot of the stuff we enjoy over here in this side of video gaming.
Yeah, so there are some characters in story games that have facial expressions and visemes and some animations, but it's not the most common thing in the world. Like, we're talking AAA $1 million budget games have them, like, that have taken them 5 years to make, versus in VRChat, we see those every avatar. If we could make like an average of like one person, like one avatar per game, right? Out of all the avatars in all the games, there is more avatars with these fancy features in VRChat than in PC games.
Wow.
And there's only, like, if you put an avatar to a person, we have, what, like, 5-10 million people that play VRChat, and there's less than 100,000 or 500,000 that actively play on and off. It's still more. The active player base alone is still more than video games that I've ever played.
Wow.
So we take this kind of for granted, because speaking through a character and moving all these little things do not happen in PC gaming. If you go to any game that you boot up tonight and look at it, and look at their face, whatever, if the camera even shows the character's face, you will see their mouth will not move. They will have dialogue lines. There will be UI that talks for them with an image, and their face isn't moving. Okay. So if you were to mod the game and have a third-person camera look at your character, you might not even have a head, or a body for that matter.
Okay. So the entire process of making a VR avatar and video game character design are very different, like apples and oranges?
I would say yes, because there's a lot more detail that goes into VR chats or VR avatars in general than normal character. However, the process of making a character is the same, it is just with extra steps.
Okay. So it's the same to a point. So that's...
Yes.
So most avatar designers here in VRChat, like there's a bunch, basically have learned the same process any other video game does to make their characters with extra steps.
With a lot of extra steps, yeah.
Okay. So, if necessary, you could take one of those avatar designers and then drop them into a character creation team of a game, and they'd be pretty much equipped to do the same thing as long as they're using Unity.
Yes, as long as they're using Unity, that's correct. There'd probably be a lot less work, too, for them to do, because they don't have to do every movement of the face, tail, legs, and everything else.
Okay. So, let's jump into a whole other thing. What brought you into VR and VRChat in the
What brought me into VRChat? That is a good question. What brought me into VRChat probably is, from the beginning, the first reason was I was bored. There wasn't a lot of VR games at the time when I went in. The first game I played that was social was this VR bar experience, and then it was like Altverse, I forget what it is. Altspace, there we go, Altspace, and then VRChat. So I was in social VR before VRChat existed. The first time I logged into VRChat was on the HTC Viveport store, before it was even in Steam. And I went into VRChat because I thought it'd be a great way to meet people and talk, because I've already been in some social VR, and this was an upgrade. Not only could I upload my own character and I can make my own character, I can now talk to people in that custom made character with custom worlds, entirely community based. It was like an upgrade. So I got into it is bored from other games, went into social VR, then into VRChat as an upgrade.
Okay. So I've actually seen a few people from Altspace come into VRChat recently with the shutdown. Did you ever use Altspace all that much?
Yeah, I probably used it for like hundreds of hours before VRChat.
Okay. So what is Altspace and how much different from VRChat is it?
So Altspace is like VRChat, but you can't upload avatars. Right? You can't go into Unity and change whatever you want. So Altspace is mostly the social aspect, but without the community part. Right? Like I can't just go in, make a world, and as easily as I can with OpenUnity, make a world, drop assets in it, program it, I'm done. Right? It was a lot more specific. They had, I think, their own software, and they had the stuff you wanted to do, and if you wanted to build a world, at the beginning at least, you had to work with them to do it. It
Hmm.
wasn't as freeform, at least from my view. And then later, it was more customizable. You could do it, but it was still like you used libraries of assets, and you can make worlds based off that library.
Hmm.
Versus VRChat, I can make something in Blender, put it in Unity, do whatever I want with it, and upload it like I can with avatars.
Okay. So, what was VR chat like when you hopped in? Because I came in like about at the start of the COVID era. I have not known what was like back before pre-Steam.
So before there was surprisingly very little anime people and furry avatars. That did not exist. It's hilarious, but it did not exist. What we know today of VRChat was a lot more developer and community relationships. So the developers would be in VRChat
Hmm.
themselves. So they were actually more with the community, and this is like when they first started their Discord and they started doing more community. The first year of VRChat was like the true meaning of what VRChat wanted to be, and then the second year after that, which I was in the first year, but my VR broke, so I missed like most of personally being in that first year. I was in more like the second year afterwards when I fixed it.
Hmm.
And then after that, when I got into VRChat again, there was still a little bit of avatars starting to become like anime girls. Look at this cute anime girl, but it was mostly just random avatars. So we had like cartoon-looking characters, realistic characters, uncanny characters, toon characters like we're familiar with today, which
Hmm.
was like anime girls and furries, the toon stuff. But a lot of those shaders didn't come into fruition yet. Like Pyome was a little later.
Hmm.
So we had just random shaders, random stuff, and you just saw different avatars everywhere. But we started at that point to use Booth, so it started to turn into what we know today. It was actually pretty early. But like the first year was nothing like it is today. Now we have the developers are as far away from VR chat people as possible, and they have a community board, and they don't talk to, they don't talk to people as much as they used to.
Hmm.
Um, and it's like totally different dev team. So the dev team is like entirely different,
Hmm.
because VR chat was originally made by two people as a
Oh
joke,
wow.
literally as a joke.
Wow.
I don't understand why they would not be successful if they're the first game to do that. Um, but I don't think they noticed that.
Hmm.
When it happened, they exploded immediately, and they're like, "Wow, I don't know what to do now." Which is why the updates in the older VR chat were very slow. It is not like today where we get an update every week or an update every month. It was like years apart. We just get like one big massive update like every year or so, or a bunch of patches sprinkled without, because again they didn't have a huge dev team. It was a very small dev team. They started hiring people, and then recently 2020 era they just exploded hiring professional developers completely. So now you get normal updates.
Hmm.
Right, but before they were just a couple guys that would make this. So they were very in VR chat themselves, and even the new people they hired were also in VR chat. And then they added the middleman, the Discord, the community board, and everything else.
Hmm.
They had somewhat of it, right? The second year, but it what we know today is it transformed over like 3 years into the VR chat we know today, and then 2020 is taking all of the mods that the community made and then putting them as vanilla features, which was good for them to do that, but also the limitation of anti-cheat was huge bummer.
Hmm. So I'm gonna start with with a statement and then lead into a question. I've actually seen a lot of
Okay.
people, especially within the rave community, see a lot of the VR chat staff hang out. Like for example, they'll see Tupper all over the place, as well as other various other uh, dev team members as well. So they're still active in the community, but since VR chat, unlike early days, is a lot larger, you see them a lot less frequently. It's not like it's a lot like
Mm-hmm.
uh, being a teacher of a small class versus a large class. It's not like you can really work with each student individually if you have like 50 students in your class versus like 10 to 20. but they're still there, and a lot. Even some of the people we've talked to has told us they'll see Tupper around or one of the other dev teams, and then I'll bring it to you after that before I lead into the question. I feel like I'm railroading you, and I
Okay.
feel like
Yeah.
a
No.
dick.
Absolutely. No. I've seen Tepper too. I've absolutely seen Tepper previously and today. Absolutely, they're still here. It's just like as you said, they're not as much simply because it's bigger, right?
Mm,
Like I personally don't get to see them a lot unless I'm in certain circles. I have found them again in the modern era, but
mm,
in the old era, right? There's different developing team and there's more of them. So yes, we do see them.
mm,
But from my perspective, right, I started to see them less, simply because, as you said, it got bigger, um, because I went into different things.
mm,
But yeah, I love the rave genre of the game, and that's when I re-met them. So
okay. So,
you're right.
how do you feel about how things have changed as a whole from where it started to where it is now?
Well, I think some good things and bad things, right? The good things is we have bigger game, more
Mm,
community members. We have more features that make the game more comfortable and optimized, so it doesn't burn my computer to death. And mostly, and the fact that we have bigger communities and we have dozens of them. You can get to any category, we can talk about it, right? Because we have
mm,
the Discord servers and VR chat of any category. That's great. And also the fact that it's easier to upload content into the platform, right?
mm,
Sometimes it's harder, but most of the time it is a lot easier. The things I don't like up until this point that have changed is I don't like the anti-cheat. I don't think that was a great move on their part. That's the first thing. Second thing is I don't think that relying on investments or stockholders in this point in VRChat was a smart decision for the game itself, but was a smart decision in terms of a business sense.
mm,
Um, so the way that they're structured now, I liked when they were more indie, where they would freeform instead of super corporatized. But the
mm,
game itself, I love the game, right? That's why I'm here with
mm,
thousands of hours. The game itself versus the old, indie versus corporate, more freedom versus restriction, right? But we have a lot more freedom now because it runs smoother and it's easier to get stuff into the platform and quicker,
mm,
and a lot no more developer bugs as we say, or a lot less of them.
mm. Okay. So, how would you have rather seen them do their business side of things? Because from the way I've seen and talked to various people, VRChat seems very hesitant or its player base seems hesitant to see VRChat try to make money. Let's be honest. I'm sure VRChat side of things, like servers, for an example, must not be a very cheap and easy thing to run with all the ridiculous avatars and worlds with stupid amounts of things on them running all the time. I can only imagine the servers are crying.
Absolutely, they are.
Hmm. So, how would you have rather seen them do their business then from someone who's been there in the beginning?
I would have to say that as a person who does a little bit of business myself because of I have to market my game and
Mm,
um, put a store page, but I only do like basic business, so take it with a grain of salt. But in my opinion, I wish they went to the donation route of having supporters. I mean, the subscription that they have, that's fine. That's perfect. But the instead of stockholders, I wish they have more donation based, kind of like how Blender is,
mm,
because that's for a community game. Um, Blender is a community open source software, so VRChat is on the line between open source and not, because it's very community based and like half the API is open, the other one's not. Um, so I would have rather that they did more donation based instead of stockholders, because there is enough people in VRChat that would totally do that, and there's companies that would totally support VRChat if they marketed themselves. Maybe they did, and I'm not in it, so I wouldn't know.
mm,
Um, but donation based, I would have seen a lot more, and I think a lot of people would have liked that more because simply the way Blender does it is fantastic. The way Godot is slowly becoming whatever. It seems that with communities and with programmers and artists, that open source softwares and donation based models seem to be very popular at the moment, right?
Mm.
And I think would have been very well received by the community to have that amount of freedom and support.
Mm. Yeah, I do agree. VRChat. Well, I do see VRChat being a very much of a giving community. I don't. If they were to go the donation route, no doubt a lot of people would go down and donate the money. That's like within my friend group, for an example, the amount of people who spend a lot of time in VR chat. It's like, yeah, I'm gonna get the VR chat plus because I spend a lot of time here already. $10 a month is nothing if it means I get 10 extra bucks to do whatever with. If they'd open like some donation box or whatever, like guaranteed they'd make at least some money. Probably not as much as their corporate investors now, but would have been at least something.
It absolutely would have been enough to keep them afloat for a very long time. Like I get that in my mind, right? I'm not like a huge profit person. If you can run the company, right,
Mm.
with all the expenses and all the employees, it's like you're break even. You've done it. Perfect. Now it's time to like take that model of business and generate money with it. Right.
Mm.
That's great. But the issue is there's probably more ways to get money than stockholders. Um, we live in a Kickstarter era. So there's donation based. You could even sell real estate, um, have people required um, 5 advertising posters in VR chat worlds.
Mm.
Right. And they then sell those advertising posters like we do in real life with billboards and sell them to companies. And they pay like a investment package to put their advertisements in it. Now, that's not great, but as long as it's
Yeah.
done correctly, they make money.
Mm. Yeah. So, how would you think the VRChat community would accept advertising? Like you're required 5 posters somewhere and various things. Although to be fair, in VRChat worlds now, they do kind of do the advertising. Like for example, Black Hat or LS Media or whatever. You'll see lots of posters everywhere. You just have to go to Patreon now instead of going through VRChat specifically. Maybe they would accept it a little easier than what I think they would. I don't know.
See, I think that at the beginning they would have hated it.
Mm.
But as VR chat changed into the modern era, like after 2020 and 2019, I think they would have accepted it as long as it's not like too overbearing and in their face. Like how we have advertisements now is not in your face, and
Mm.
that's done correctly. To have posters in the world that you don't have to look at them, but they're there, right?
Yeah.
And you look at them. Some people do, and some people don't. I think that's the right way to do it. And if they did it that way, right, they would have made a lot more money, and they wouldn't need to rely on these stockholders. Plus, there's even more money than just advertisements. Like you could sell, I don't know, later in life when we have like VR and XR gets better, you could
Mm.
have like types of not just billboard data, but like um, types of 3D portfolios where you can have all of your work in like a museum style world, and you
Mm.
basically package that up and say, well, we have this huge gigabyte world for you, right? And if you buy like an extra subscriber to the developer or VRChat plus plus, then you get a free world, and you can buy more world slots that are huge, huge like gigabyte worlds that are made for demonstrations to sell to companies, right? That company
Mm.
worlds where your employees can work there, or you can show off your portfolios in VR. Because if you have a VR asset, the only way you can show it off is in VR. It doesn't look the same on PC.
No. And you do kind of have I do see that being a pretty good option for companies as well. Although they would have to figure out if like large worlds like that for like demonstrations or like big corporate events, they'd have to figure out ways to host more people in a world. Like for
Yes.
example, like in our in VR chat's music scene, that's something that they could easily fill in a night. Like the whole the pop up and tuber or rave till the grave could fill an instance quickly, but necessarily having the ability to run it is another thing, I guess.
Yeah, but if we think of like business models and a whole purpose, if it's money, they'll find a way to do it.
Mm,
Right? If there was money on the line that they could make a buttload of money, most likely the company would get bigger, the reputation would get bigger. They'd find a way to do it. That's the one thing about business. If there's a challenge to increase your money, you normally find a way to do it,
mm,
right? And that's like a IT engineering issue, programming issue, but it can be done because we have MMORPGs that have thousands of players, and now the highest server player count I think now is 100,000 or more.
wow.
What?
Well,
Yes. Love you too. Good night.
well,
Yeah. So there's. Go. Sorry. Excuse me.
oh, that's okay. Understandable. Everything is perfectly fine. Life happens. Yeah, I'm not.
Yes.
If VRChat was to take that route, I think that initially they're gonna have some pushback from the community in terms of like fear of corporatization. Like for example, when the VRChat creator economy started taking because VRChat was talking about it, you could see like in VRChat Twitter within the rave scenes and such, they had a lot of people like split down the middle in terms of like where they stood in the line, money or no money. How is it going to affect our community? Will VRChat be the same? And I think that's something. I maybe the community like us on the player side should start talking about how we're going to accept something like that, because as what I've heard a couple of times, it doesn't seem like VRChat's making much of a profit right now.
Yeah. From what I'm seeing, at least in the game and what's happening
Mm,
over the years, they are making enough money to stay afloat. They would probably like to make more, so they
mm,
can hire more people. But the subscription and what they get from investors from other companies.
mm,
There are other big companies like Apple or Google. I don't know if they do anymore, but there was some news that they have invested a bit of money
mm,
into it before, and I think Meta did as well at the beginning, but I don't think they do anymore. But
mm.
yeah, there was big companies that gave them a lot of money to do this. Even though, what's hilarious is Meta never talks about VR chat ever.
No, no, they
Um,
don't. But the funny thing is when you go into Horizon Worlds, it looks like a poor quality VR chat, to be honest.
yes, yes, it does. Uh, it absolutely does, and that's the hilarious part. I wish they knew what Neos was. I wish Meta knew what Neos was.
Well,
Um,
hmm. To be honest, in the modern age with VR picking up, you could see companies like Meta or Google or whomever trying to, as you see in many advertisements, we are the first metaverse out there. Like, no, you're not the first out there. And I think they're trying to be the only one out there. But like Horizon Worlds, like they're down to the pooper now, and VR chat's still around even with its current business model.
yeah, exactly, and that just shows that the best business model is community based, and have everyone have the freedom to make whatever you want and do whatever you want, with of course some filters. Um,
Mm.
and I think that as a fun fact, right, about Neos, Neos is actually labeled in the VR history as the first metaverse.
Oh.
That's already in the VR history books. They have been labeled the first metaverse and as the first metaverse.
Mm. Wow.
The first metaverse, the first attempt at a metaverse. Because compared to what the requirements of what a metaverse is, Neos is dead as a metaverse and is now just a community game. Because
Mm.
its economy portion is gone. So, or as gone as it is than it used to be, right? At the peak of what it used to be.
Mm.
So that is a label of what metaverse is. It has to have an economy. It has to have, stuff by the people, like community made. It has to be markets. There has to be trade, and there has to be currency, right? And VRChat doesn't have that. Neither does Meta's whatever verse, and neither does Google's or Nvidia's. Nobody has that.
Mm.
They have one economy, or they have the community. They don't have both.
Mm. Well, in some way, VRChat does have an economy. It's just not running through VRChat. Like you'll see people trade for money for avatars and services, events and so on. Like you'll like through Booth, Gumroad, or even through PayPal as an example. So it still technically does. It's just not like officially through VRChat specifically.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's the issue. As a metaverse, it has to be through entirely in the platform.
Mm.
The whole purchase process has to be in it, and there has to be a currency, just like Fortnite has their V-Bucks. There has to be a currency in the game
Mm.
for the trade of that currency and a self-reliance economy within the game itself.
Okay.
Is how it's defined. So yes, technically, VRChat does have a market and does have a trade. Absolutely, because I buy and sell stuff. And you probably bought a lot of stuff,
Mm.
and many other people. But it's not in VRChat, right? Like I can't just like go over to a shop, click on a chair, buy it, and then it opens up a window in VRChat. PayPal comes up, and I press buttons, and I'm done. I can't do that.
Mm. No. But I believe there are current talks about trying to bring that in. At least I think it's in VRChat's radar, and I think they're contemplating and testing the waters with the creator economy coming out. And I just don't know how VRChat's going to do the in-currency portion. Although the coding in Windows and having like a place to download your purchased chair you talked about, like you go into VRChat, go to a VRChat store, buy your chair, go to the website, download your chair, edit, upload, done. And I think that within VRChat side is easy to do, but I'm not sure how like the cross-country currency thing, like how Second Life does it, for an example, with the Linden dollars.
Yeah. So the point of having like a cryptocurrency or a type of currency in the game is
Mm.
to convert money from other countries into a digital currency.
Mm.
Right? That's like the huge workaround. Like that's how all these games you see like Fortnite and everything else, the reason they have a currency is to deassociate the money from the real world into a game so that you can transfer your money wherever you are into a money that's digital that has different value, that it's a universal coin of everyone's money, right? Whether you're in England or in America
Mm.
or in Germany or in China. That's that's kind of, I mean, we've had the idea for like a universal currency and even cryptocurrency like before, even at the starting of video games, but like it never could be done. And then
Mm.
video games showed that like this could work, and then cryptocurrency started, right? Like in publicly,
Mm.
and then that kind of worked. And it seems that video games, in terms of a cryptocurrency, if we're gonna have one, it's going to be in a metaverse and nowhere else. Like it doesn't fit in the real world, but it fits in a digital universe.
Mm. Yeah. I do see the cryptocurrency working in a video game versus real life, but maybe having some possible way of having it breach both for like people to buy and trade the coin in real life, but not really be able to do anything with it other than buy and sell like a stock, while people in game can spend the coin to do things, but you won't be able to do it outside of. So they'll give you the ability to exchange the coin from VR chat into real life. So you'll take VR chat coin. Like, let's say you make avatars and you've made 400,000 VR chat coins, which translate to like $400 or something. You can translate that out of because it's also a real life cryptocurrency as well. So it has some real life value versus just being in game. Otherwise, it's like buying and selling gold in RuneScape.
Yeah, pretty much. There actually was, from my knowledge, there actually was, I forget the game is, but there actually was a game where it could transfer in real life money to the game coin and the game coin to in real life money.
Yeah, that was Second Life with
And it
London
was
dollars.
alive. Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
I think it's that one.
yeah, Second Life
I'm
did
pretty
it.
sure there's some others too.
Yeah, the funny thing is, my cousin bought his first car with Linden dollars. Like he ran a club in
Oh, interesting.
Second Life and translated that to about $1,200 and bought his first car.
God damn. That's
Yeah.
great.
Yeah. So that stuff like that is possible. I just wonder how VR chat is going to do it, or if they want to. I think VR chat being a community base may I wonder how hesitant they are and why. Although I've never had the pleasure to speaking with staff or the mods dev team like Tupper, so I don't know. I can only speculate at this point.
Yeah, I mean, in my opinion, right, I think it would be very good for them if they did it correctly, right? If they didn't overbear it and they allowed players freedom, they allowed the corporate stuff to not interfere a little. Having corporate is fine as long as it's not bleeding into the game, right?
Mm.
If it's touching the develop team, it's too much corporate because that interferes in the freedom of what you're selling,
Mm.
right? So if you were to get a cryptocurrency in game and have it work, potentially you would have a small economy, not a huge economy compared to the whole country of the United States, but you would have a starting of an economy. And as more people get into VR and VR and XR join together into this, you can access VR chat from your glasses, from your dive device to your VR headset, to your XR headset,
Mm.
like AR headset. If you have this massive ecosystem in like 10 years and VR chat is the first to do so, they make potential billions of dollars. They
Mm.
turn into an Apple in less than 30 years. They
Mm.
just have so much money because they've capitalized on what Meta, Apple, Google have failed to do.
Mm.
Right.
Well,
So
yeah.
if they were to do it correctly, right, and if they were to allow the freedom where it's like close to open source, give the freedom of like the what people do with their worlds, and give ownership to those worlds to the creators, and like they can't touch it because they don't have ownership of it, even though they
Mm.
made the game, they only made what's called the tools to make that content
Mm.
possible. So it's like if Windows taxed you, oh, you have Windows, but you use Windows for your work. So we're going to tax you on your work. And I'm like, no. No, no, I bought the computer. Your software is a tool set for me to do stuff, right? That's what VR chat
Mm.
is. It's a tool set for you to do stuff in a digital world,
Mm.
right? It's like Windows, but for computers. It's the operating system of the metaverse.
Mm.
And in that, if they understand that and move on with that, then potentially it's not the billions they're going to make, it's the billions of market value that they generate, which means everyone will give them money to continue
Mm.
automatically.
Yeah.
Like companies will invest in them. They'll say, "Here's some money, put an advertisement in your worlds, or pay your pay your world creators some money to put this advertisement up." We would do it. Like if somebody paid us $1,000 to put this poster up of the world, and they make the advertisement money, I get $1,000. I'll do that. How many do you want?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I've there'd be a lot of people who would be very willing for like $1,000 to put up a poster. Fuck, lots of average players will allow a poster to sit on the back of their avatars and run around worlds for fuck's sake, like NASCAR cars with all those logos plastered all over it. Lots of people be very willing to run those. Though,
Yeah, I mean that's the whole thing. If they get that, it works. But if they don't get that and they do it incorrectly, it doesn't work.
mm, though currently with this current user base, you are also going to bear in mind half of the player base wants to enjoy VR as an escape. So when you once you incorporate that, then VR chat will have to then decide whether if it's going to be a game or an operating system for the metaverse. Because at that point, a lot of people come into VR chat as a means of fun and escape and other world stuff. Like, I'll use the rave scene since I talked about it a lot. There are a lot of people who run a club not because they want to make a business, but because they enjoy doing it. And then, with that said, the same for world creators and avatar creators and many other communities here that treat VR chat like that versus a business. So then, with its player base as well, VRChat will have to decide its identity and how it's going to do that, like on our side, not VRChat the company.
Yeah, no, I agree with that viewpoint. Yeah, a lot of people wouldn't like that change, but like here's the problem, right?
Mm.
Because of how VR chat was made from the beginning, and if the beginning that was set, it would have been very easy for people to come into the platform and be like, oh, okay, right, this is the purpose of this
Mm.
platform. But we didn't do that. VR chat didn't do that. They didn't decide what they wanted the game to be until 6 years after it was made. So we
Mm.
have like part of the community that want it to be the metaverse and part of the community that just like it's just a game. But what some people, maybe they do realize, and some people don't, right, is the fact that what you're using is not a game. You're using a platform like Facebook or Twitter, but you're in VR and it looks like a game.
Mm.
But technically, it's already evolved into a social media of sorts. But it still looks like a game to most people. But
Mm.
if we look at it from a step back and from the grand scheme of it, it is a social media platform now. We have advertisements. We have money going in and out of it. And now at this point, whenever you own a world and there's more than 50 or 20 people in the world, you own a business, whether you like it or not. Because if there's any money going through your world and going through your business model of running a club, it's a business now. And as a person who has been in the club and also helped some clubs and been promoted to second in command of running a club for like 6 months,
Mm.
it is a business, whether you like it or not. The second you have money going through it, and you have donations, and you have to use those donations to pay like small $5 things to get people to show up to meetings and everything, and get people together as a one thing, it is now a business. We would all like it to be fun, right? Like we run a business in RuneScape, right? We just trade coins and we trade stuff, but that's not a business because it's a game. The problem with this is there's real world money going through VRChat already, and now it's not a game anymore.
Yeah.
And and some people still think it is. I still think it is a game, but then other times I'm like, oh, God, it's a platform.
VRChat currently and most VR platforms I see as an in between a game and a platform slash business. It's like the weird middle ground between the two where it's both a game and a platform. So it's not like it's like your Facebook where it's a platform only, where they tried to do games but failed, sort of. Because if not, Farmville would still be around. But in VRChat, you have people building games and running things and having fun with it, versus also being a social media platform. It kind of started as a game and runs as a platform second, sort of, I guess is a way to put it. Because it's fun first, business after, which kind of gives it a unique identity in itself. So it'd be kind of hard to run all of that in its own way, I guess.
Yeah, you're right. It is a combination of all those things. But that's like the greatest part of the game, but also the worst part of the game because we don't know what it is. And as a human being, right, we all like to know from the get-go, where am I going? What is this? What am I playing? Right? Like, how do I have to act or how do I have to be and whatever. And that's normally how it is. We like to know as human beings what we're into, right? Like, oh, is it a platform? Is it a business? Whatever. Am I going to work or am I having fun? What am I doing? Right? We like to know that what we're playing is what we expect. Right? Like if you go to a bar, you expect you're going to go drinking with your buddies. You're going to socialize and then you leave and that's it. There's nothing else. Right? But if you expect you go to a strip club, totally different thing. Or if you go home, right, to family or bring friends over, right? You have the expectation. And that expectation is different in VRChat depending on the world that you join, which is great. But that's also the worst part of it because there are some worlds and some places where it's all of those three together and it kind of confuses your expectations of how you're supposed to act because people like having their work face and their personal face. And that screws with that because there's no middle line. I personally have had that feeling where I'm like, I feel like I'm working, but I feel like I'm also having fun. Okay.
Well,
right? It's that weird screw up in the head or in the brain that makes it weird.
Well, at least that on a bonus note, I remember hearing a quote from a gentleman. I was in a hospital once, and one of the older folks there told me, if you enjoy what you do, you never work a day in your life. And let's be honest, most VRChat players enjoy being here. So if this was to slide into a business where if you're running a community, for an example, you can benefit from it. It's not just VRChat and we're just kind of the product. If they allow the community to benefit just as much from the transition into a platform as like the metaverse operating system, then you will also allow people to enjoy what they do because let's be honest, there are people in here with thousands upon thousands of hours because they enjoy it, whether they're running a club or dancing about, making avatars or what say you, it will allow people to enjoy the work. And a lot of people who, like, I'm still baffled to this day when I go into clubs, and the amount of organization that's there, the amount of effort people put into learning like business practice to proper run staff and run meetings, the amount of skill sets people learn here to know how to make a world, make an avatar, run a company of sorts, like a miniature company with a club, to be able to do coding like with you teaching yourself C+. The amount of effort in this platform I see people put forth baffles and amazes me. So it provides people that platform to do both fun and work, which can move in VRChat's benefit to a degree.
Yeah, that's why I say it's the best and worst because VRChat hasn't decided which way to go, right? And they have to decide quite soon, or else the community will decide for them, and they won't like that because they're corporate now. They don't like that. But it will be decided very soon, and they have to. That's why they're thinking about it because they can see that shifting that they're taking too long and that it's going to be decided for them, right? Because they have no control over what we make, right, and what we do with it. And based off law in the United States, a company is responsible for what is made on their software. So the only way that they would legally get around that is open source it and just say, well, we don't own it. Or they would have to have some more of control, which I believe that's why they have anti-cheat. They're trying to not be screwed by business law to do that. And also, they could have just done this on a whim, and they don't know that's a business danger. But on the platform portion, right, they have to also decide this decision because the community wants to know, is this for the long term going to be like business fun and all of it together, but is now going to turn into the tools, or it's going to be open source, right? What is it going to be, right? Everyone wants to know that. The devs want to know that. The company wants to know that. The stockholders want to know that. We want to know that. And it has to be made quite soon since it's just getting bigger and bigger. And if they don't do it soon, it's going to be very hard. If they want to go the control route with corporate, if it gets too big, they can't necessarily control it fast enough. And then the community wins. And then it goes back to what they didn't want. But if they accept the community and they go open source, then they don't have to care because that's not their responsibility anymore. Right. So there's like different choices that have to be made very soon, which is why I think, yes, they are talking about economy and everything else, is so that they can see that. And because they're going corporate route, that's probably why, because they want to control certain things, because at the end of the day, it is their game, right? Unfortunately.
Yeah.
And they will have to make that decision.
I believe with internet, like most other platforms, like Google, for an example, or YouTube, VRChat has to decide whether they're a publisher or an editor. Are they to control the content people push out and to allow them to do so, or, as you say, be open sourced and allow them to post whatever? And I do agree, VRChat does have to decide as like on their end what is VRChat, and I do agree there. Because let's be honest, here now with a lot of the larger communities like Tuber and some of the other larger communities with streamers, for example, they're already starting to generate money. And at that point in time, before they decide, they have miniature companies already with underneath their company. So without much direction, there's going to, if they don't decide soon, those companies will have more sway and profits versus their own thing. And if they decide after that, then at that point in time, they're quashing those things they let flourish for a late decision.
Yes. And if they make that late decision, they lose lots of reputation. One of the examples of that is the anti-cheat. They were too late to make that decision. That already sailed, and they did squash stuff that already happened. Like it was like 2 years late, if not 3 years late, of that decision. And then they made anti-cheat, and you saw the explosion of negative reviews on Steam, right? And everyone hated it because what happened is we already decided as a community, this is what VRChat is. We're gonna make stuff, we're gonna do stuff, and we're gonna do and change whatever we want with the API. And the company just went, no, that's our software. right? Instead of going, oh, here you go, that's fine,
Mm.
right? That decision was way too late, and they basically sold their soul, in a way. That's what it felt like to us,
Mm.
right? And that's going to be worse with this decision,
Yeah.
right? If they don't make this decision on time, they don't just get their reputation gone. They lose massive amounts of people, and they'll go make their own VR chat. That's like the last straw. Like someone will make their own VR chat. They've been attempts after anti-cheat, but it wasn't like full attempts. But with enough people that leave, they will create another VR chat that is better with similar functions, and it's good.
Mm.
Or they'll join some of the attempts that are already happening.
Mm. Well, I'm gonna
So, it,
play a bit of devil's advocate here as well. Is first with the easy anti-cheat, a lot of the people who are upset that they incorporated it have come back. And on top of that, the community itself seems to,
True.
after the dust is settled, seem to be happy that easy anti-cheat is there. Because let's say, for example, yes, mods are gone and that's horrible, but now you can be in a fur lounge or black hat without worrying about being blitzed by some dude's multi-instance botnet that's out there. Because with the mod section that was there, you also dealt with a lot of other people that existed that made the game almost virtually unplayable. Because when I first started was before easy anti-cheat, and I couldn't go in a fur lounge without worrying about having my instance crashed and my game crash or my PC blue screen or something. And that was a problem. Now it's not. And a lot of people are very glad they can hang out in those lobbies like Black Hat, for an example, and not worry about some dude's botnet who he has running 24/7 because he hates kids or whatever. And the community now seems to sense that they're glad it's there because it deterred those people. And the people who left because of easy anti-cheat, like that, I'll use Chill Out VR as an example to hang over that way. The people who are in VR chat now seem to see a lot of those people as a very angry and grumpy community that kind of prevent them from wanting to move, because all they do over there is kind of, it's like seeing the angry Twitter people, for an example. Why would you want to go into Twitter or X? Well, you have to see a bunch of people rage all day, every day. And some of that angry, easy anti-cheat community is kind of like that, no offense. I don't mean to offend you there, but it's just kind of how I see it.
you do not. You do not offend me. It's very difficult to do that. I'm pretty sure that only very few people in my life have ever offended me. So you're fine.
I'm just being blunt. I'm like that with everybody.
Of course. Of course. But damn, wow, blank. Could you repeat the last sentence of what you said?
Okay.
My brain just blanked.
It's okay. A lot of the community of people who left VR chat because of easy anti-cheat are a bit toxic and remind me a lot of the time of like the angry Twitter people that rage about everything.
Okay.
So when like for example, there's some people I've talked with here on and off air who kind of mentioned that, like over in Chill Out, for example, or some of that community hangs out, kind of make it hard to hang out over there because they're still talking about easy anti-cheat. It's been a couple of years now, and they still rage about it, and very upset still. So with that community, I very much understand if people of VR chat with easy anti-cheat, if they left, they can make a new VR chat. But people will also be very accepting to change things. But with a business side of things, where the question we're at now, I don't think the community can move past that if they decide to do it late. Like I think VR chat's at a point where they have to decide the direction that the community needs to move in before, as you say, the community moves anyway. Because you got things like Tuber, for an example, working with augmented reality, mixing with their worlds and stuff. Like, there's come to a point where the tech and the community is going to move in a business sense, and it's going to be wild. But if VR chat waits till after things have moved, I agree with you. They'll lose their reputation because of that.
Yeah, so the reason, as when you play devil advocate, right, like the reason people came, in my opinion, the reason people came back, right, is because at least imagine if for a minute, right, they put anti-cheat and there wasn't those people that were angry at everybody else that didn't crash your worlds, right? Let's say
Mm.
they weren't there and they just did that as a control thing, right? We don't like your mods. Kind of like how some game companies are like, oh, we don't want your mods. We're going to create an entity system and get rid of it,
Mm.
right? Imagine how that would be. It would be a lot worse if there wasn't people being angry at the world,
Yeah.
right? Let's just say they didn't find VRChat, right? And they didn't do that.
Mm.
That would have been a lot worse. They would have been screwed, right? But
Yeah.
because there is like a villain, right, that people didn't like, they're like, okay, I could deal with this. It gets rid of the bad people. All right, that's not too bad, right?
Mm.
There's a point and blame at, right? But the direction portion, the next decision that they're making, there is no point and blame. Like it's not like you're not removing a problem. It's a new technology that's emerging, and you're not using it
Mm.
versus using it. It's a lot different decision, which is why I say it's going to hurt the reputation because it's a different decision. The
Mm.
anti-cheat was a like solving a problem to get rid of like gatekeeping, very negative hackers that want to destroy your game and do everything else, right? But imagine if that was put there for a different reason and there was no angry people in the world,
Mm.
right? That would have been totally different Fallout, and that would have
Yeah.
been a lot worse for them.
Oh yeah, no, I agree. If that angry, aggressive crasher community wasn't there, then yes, it would have been a lot worse and of uh, a different tone, one would say. But with easy anti-cheat specifically, it seems like the VRChat community as a whole kind of moved past it a bit because things are calmer now. But with the becoming VRChat deciding on being a publisher or an editor, that I don't think won't result in the same kind of I'll just forgive them because of this. Because at that point in time, there's a bunch of communities here that have existed years, and whether or not they'll have to pay for their land or not, or what say you if they do what Neos did, leading into NFTs or uh, Horizon Worlds or whatever. I think they're beyond that point to decide to monetize that much that hard.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. They probably won't leave because they've built something very valuable. And if you're taking that away from them, it's very similar, right? Like, even with the community members, I believe that the fight would be very similar to how game developers fought Unity not so long ago. When
Mm.
Unity decided to break business models, and businesses went, no, you're not doing that. You're going to take that back, or you're going to regret that very badly. It's not going to be the same tone or Fallout, but it is definitely going to be similar to that,
Mm.
right? it's it's they're not going to be very happy with having their communities built. They make money from it. They build a business and then they take it away. And now you not only have, right, because some of these already have businesses, right? I've actually met some things that actually goes money through, and there's some clubs that have been on for a long time, whether they've stayed or not, where they're still here. There's like what, like 5 years
Mm.
or something, if not like six, and they have huge communities and whatever. And if you take that away from them, they will treat it like a business just so that they can defend themselves, and they will eventually, like if enough communities build a business and they group together to go to court in real life, that's a problem for VRChat.
Mm.
That is very harmful. And they're like, wait a minute, we didn't know you could sue.
Mm. Well, I'm. That'll be a bit harder to sue, especially since VRChat crosses so many borders globally. But in terms of like losing
They
its
do.
community en masse, I think that'll be a problem that if they decide to like rip the rug from underneath everybody. Let's like I want to use Tuber because I mentioned it before. If Tuber leaves to a different platform, its entire base of people and the DJs and the people who work on the lights, the lasers, everything, the entire community is going to go with them. There'll be little questions about
Yep.
it. Like if they decide we're going to Resonite now, that's hundreds, if not thousands, of people gone. And once Tuber goes, with the DJ community being so interconnected as it is, it'll be only a matter of time before the rest of them go too. And if that entire side of VRChat goes, I'd say 50 to 75, maybe even 90% of the community is going to be going with them to that platform. Because a lot of people here enjoy partying. That's a lot of different asset creators that are connected to them and will go with them. People are going to want access to the new things. So if one big community goes because of something like that, the rest will soon follow. and the community is what kind of
Oh,
keeps VRChat around to some degree. Because it's like the only stable platform community-wise, like VR
yeah,
space anyway.
absolutely. I think that's the more I think that would be the more realistic approach, whatever. But it would be, even though that like legally VRChat like tiptoes over lines, right?
Mm.
That would still be pretty interesting because there are laws that are used for XR, because there's a lot of laws being talked out for XR and cryptocurrencies because now it matters
Mm.
for everybody, right? Because it's getting to the point where like it's emerging and some companies or some parts of country isn't ready for it, but it's happening anyways. So I don't think the sue could happen, right? I agree with you. It probably won't happen, but it only takes like one lawyer in a community to be like, we could do that. And that's all it takes.
Mm.
If someone's like mad enough at VRChat, which is an extreme possibility. That's why I just listed it. It's a possibility and would be a very funny thing in the history of VR law and gaming
Mm.
law. Be funny.
Well,
Not funny for VRChat, but funny for
well,
watching it.
I think the
Um,
likely response from the community and something like that is, fine, I'm gonna go build
of
my
course.
own VR chat with stripper poles and other stuff. It's like the community itself is not, like, I've learned the community is not ashamed and not worried about putting in the work to make something. Like, look how much in
Of
terms of
course.
game design people here are willing to learn just to make their own homeworld. So in terms of like
Oh,
coders from the like old modding days, or even people who code their own worlds, building a platform and then the other people creating content, I think community is more likely to create its own thing versus suing. I don't think suing
yes.
and getting legalities and money involved with something the VR chat community is doesn't seem to want to do, but they're willing to do their own
Yeah.
thing
So
somewhere else.
yeah. So I said before that yes, most likely they just move to another platform and make your own VR chat if they didn't make a certain decision, right?
Mm.
But the context that I bring up for the suing is if this is VR chat, like there's businesses that grow into VR chat and
Oh
it
yeah,
gets
yeah, yeah.
even bigger. So it's not even something that would happen now. If the metaverse becomes a thing, that could be a problem. So it's like usually after the decision, the big decision has to be made now. But it's like, it's just like a funny thing to talk about because we don't have
Mm.
actual laws or things in place or anything else to
No.
even sue in that regard.
Mm.
So that's the only reason I say that, because it's interesting
Oh,
for a future thought
oh yeah, no. As
that would be
I
for it. It wouldn't
100%.
happen now. They would absolutely just go make their own platform.
Mm. I it is a great thought experiment and having something to think about. Like, these are things I do agree we have to start thinking about now, like especially VRChat and the community, because let's be honest, VRChat needs to make money in order to function. If it doesn't make
Yep.
money to function, we won't have this amazing platform we all know and love. Like, they'll just cut, yep, we're closing doors, everyone's fired. Sorry guys, have fun somewhere else. And where are they to go? Like, there's Resonate, but it's kind of a little confusing to get into for someone who doesn't know what's going on. So, but VR chat's kind of easy, almost plug and play, sorta. So, that's something us as a community, I'll say the VR chat player base needs to start conversing and being comfortable with. Yes, that means even thinking about money. I know this is your game you enjoy doing, but it's a conversation we need to have because the metaverse and technology will not wait for anyone. I believe the saying is time waits for no man. And as Raptor said many, many times, either learn with the times or get left behind. Like, unfortunately, we're going to have to figure it out, or else some other platform made by someone else may have. Whatever it is.
Yeah, that's totally true, right? If VR chat number one doesn't make the decision, another platform will happen, or they'll either stay until they've had enough. The all the decisions that are made, as well as yes, I agree. There is tons of effort put forth, worlds, avatars. When I have seen it, you've probably seen it,
Mm.
and I have created stuff for stuff. Not even like when I create stuff, it's not like I'm kit bashing a world. No, I'm making like every prop, every model from nothing. And it takes me like months. Right?
Mm.
So firsthand, it is a lot of effort. It is thousands of hours of effort. Probably more hours than we play the game. It takes
Mm,
more hours than we actually play the game.
mm,
That's the shocking thing that Steam doesn't track, right? If Blender could track our hours for specifically Vrchat, it would be way more, like 2 to 3 times more time than we play in the game.
mm. Yeah. And I'm one of those people that I want to see people have fun, but I also want to see people putting the effort, at least having the option to make the money if they choose to take it. Like you could be one of those communities that don't and allows everything to be free and all the power to you. But if someone wants to try, then at least would like to see the option there to take if they choose to. Because I've always believed people will vote with their attention and their money. And if they think you're being a corrupt dinkbag, then they'll take their attention money somewhere else. And VR chat and its builders, whether you're building worlds or avatars, is no different. Like you'll hear many times of like someone not liking avatar creator and they'll just go through a different base model. It'll be no different that way. But at least the option's there if someone wishes to take it.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
On that particular topic, I have no comment on.
Mm. Well, I know. I'm just saying in terms of like VR chat monetizing or allow monetizing through the creator economy and whatever else comes
Oh, okay.
after. I want to see like the options for both wanting to have fun and leave it free there, but also if you want to make the money, the options there for you to take. So if the community itself doesn't like it, they can still vote with their attention and their money for those who think are worth it. Like if they think they're just someone's trying to overly price everything for money and it's not about the fun, then someone else out there else you could give your attention to. Like Vircha has a very diverse creator community. There's like worlds and avatars, so there'd be no plethora of someone else to go through. And we even still have people monetizing their own work through Booth and Gumroad now. So it's kind of there already, whether the community wants to embrace it or not.
Yeah, it actually reminds me of when I observed MMORPGs, where like the economy would be either, if there's too few players, the economy would either crash or it would go too expensive, right? And that like
Mm,
reflects the real world, where if you don't have enough people, enough support, enough stuff, your economy becomes unstable, if not doesn't exist.
mm,
So if you have the tools and freedom to do stuff and you have that option to either make money or not, right? Having that option makes you feel a lot better about being on the platform because
mm.
you can go to work or you can mentally go home at the end of the day and just relax, right? And you can do it in the same platform.
Yeah.
So that's mainly why I'm here, right? I can
Yeah.
make models or I can go talk to people
Mm,
or
yeah.
go to raves.
Yeah. It's I very much agree. And with that said, let's cut this here. Where can people find you if they wish to find you? Where are you?
Where am I? I'm in a few places. I have a Discord. My name Rechshon is the same on every platform on the internet.
Hmm.
So it is exactly the same, spelled the same, and everything else. I'm on VRChat, I'm on Discord, and I am on email. Right.
Okay.
And if you would like that email, message me on Discord, because I will give that out on a DM basis. Right. If you want to find me on contacts for work, you can find me on ArtStation. I actually have an ArtStation. My name's Rechshon Rex. If you want to find me on, you know, commissions in the future, it would mostly be contact me on Discord, right? Or look on my ArtStation.
Hmm.
And then contact me through email. That's how you can reach me.
Okay. Well,
Discord preferably.
thank you very much, Rechshon, for coming to speak with me. It's been an absolute blast getting to meet you and picking your brain. I wish you the absolute best and rest of your day. And you guys too. Have a great, wonderful rest of your night. Bye now.